Can you hear me?
Yes.
The music is continuing.
So I will now welcome you again. And as we all know, we are celebrating 135th anniversary of the Theosophical Society. And which means that it started in 1875. The founders, the basic principal founders are regarded as, we all know, H.P. Blavatsky and Henry Steele Olcott. It was not a sudden decision to make this society be born. Before the society existed, Blavatsky traveled in many countries, and then under instructions from her adept teacher in 1871, when she was in India, she was advised to go to West and to found an organization through which the West would be better known, the West would know about the ancient and ageless wisdom teachings known today as Theosophy. She then met Colonel Olcott, and with other interested persons, they formed the society. And this society was to be truly eclectic and without distinction. After a series of 6 meetings in New York City, the rules were framed and the present emblem was adopted. On 17th November, Colonel Olcott gave his inaugural address in New York, and this date is celebrated as the Foundation Day of the TIAS around the world. Today, we are going to have the program with music and words from our international president, Tim Boyd, and then messages from Vice President and our international federations to commemorate this Theosophical Celebration Day. We turn to an introduction of the music. We continue our program with a song by Leap Boundary Breakers. Since 2016, this children's choir has delighted us with various performances at Adyar. Leap Boundary Breakers is an acronym for Leadership Engagement Through Artistic Performances. It has a mission to work with schools, colleges, and institutions like the Theosophical Society to bring about greater awareness of art, cinema, music, and dance. They use music from diverse cultures as a medium to enhance creativity and teamwork. The team has been invited to over 40 destinations, one of which was this year, 2020, in January during our international convention at Varanasi. The artistic director of this project is Professor Srinivas Krishnan. Let us listen to the singing.
Now, to continue this celebration, we will share a video containing some greetings messages from our International Vice President, Mrs. Deepa, and the chairpersons of the International Federations of the Theosophical Society. Going from west to east, we have Mrs. Isis Resende from the Inter-American Theosophical Federation, Mr. Tom Davis from the Pan-African Theosophical Federation, Ms. Tran-Thi-Kim-Dieu from the European Theosophical Federation, and Mr. Gerard Brennan from the Indo-Pacific Theosophical Federation. We thank all of them for their messages.
Namaste, brothers and sisters. My warm greetings to all of you. Today, that is November 17th, is an auspicious occasion and a day of great significance. It is the day when the divine seed of Theosophical Society was planted in New York in 1875 by our great leaders of Theosophy, Madam H.P. Blavatsky and Colonel H. Olcott. It is that tiny seed which germinated and grew into an organization with the thousands of members, several branches and sections in 70 countries worldwide. The growth of the society depends very much on our committed and sincere members. Today is also the day when we need to ask ourselves, where do we stand? What are we really aiming for? The forces and the currents of thought required for bringing a change in the world are already set in motion by our founders with the masters behind them from the subtle planes. But good channels in the outer world are necessary for their expression. This is possible when members transform themselves in their thoughts, perceptions, and attitude and fulfill the mission of Theosophical Society of serving humanity. This is also the need of the hour. On this day, let us pay our humble tribute to the twin founders for their self-sacrifice, hard work of years for the society and seek their divine guidance in our thoughts and actions. Thank you.
Dear President Tim Boyd, dear fellow Theosophists, dear friends, it's a great pleasure to be here in the name of the Inter-American Theosophical Federation to talk to you in this anniversary of a century and a half, 150 years of the existence of this Theosophical Society. A society that was founded in New York, so small, so humble, but has accomplished the enormous task of influencing the world's mentality, changing values, changing procedures, changing things that should be changed. The world in which the Theosophical Society was founded is not the same as the world we live today. But nevertheless, the world that we live today still needs a lot of changes, and also our lives. In the Theosophical Society, we have the knowledge of the tools of self-transformation. The Theosophical Society is a spiritual university where we can learn how to live better, how to influence the world we are in. And let's keep it for the future generations so that its mission can be better and better and better accomplished. It's a great pleasure to be here with you to celebrate this very important moment. Thank you very much.
The Pan-African Theosophical Federation was formed in the year 2000. The West African section has members in Nigeria, Ghana, Cameroon, and Liberia. Their headquarters is in Accra, Ghana. The East and Central African section has members in Kenya, Tanzania, Zambia, and Uganda. Their headquarters is in Nairobi, Kenya. The South African section has members in Mozambique and South Africa. Their headquarters is in Johannesburg, South Africa. Aim of Pan-African Theosophical Federation. As Pan-African Theosophical Federation Theosophists, we seek to form a nucleus of universal brothers and sisters without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color. Our job as Theosophists is to help in breaking down the barriers existing between peoples because of their differences in culture, ethnicity, religion, ideology, education, and status. So, the aim is to help reduce the suffering of humanity and animals caused by man's inhumanity to one another and other forms of life. With these words, wishing all Theosophists good Foundation Day in 2020.
Greetings to all fellows and friends. Today is a special day to pay homage to the founders of our dear society and to their work. For centuries, the elder brothers tried to find suitable, unselfish souls to assist them in the great work. Finally, HPB and Olcott were the few who accepted wholeheartedly to take on their shoulders the big challenge of self-sacrifice. It is also a day to reconfirm our faith towards the universal law of love, which takes care of those who live in self-oblivion. It was affirmed by one of the masters that as long as there are 3 members worth of the benediction of our Lord, the TS will never perish. So let us work together to preserve our society so that more than 3 will be blessed in their dedication and love. Best wishes to all.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Gerard Brennan, and I am currently the president of the Indo-Pacific Federation of the Theosophical Society. It is my very best pleasure to send you greetings to all of you from the Indo-Pacific Federation of the TS. The celebration of our Foundation Day on the 17th of November is indeed an important occasion each year in the TS world. On this day, we remember the momentous occasion of the founding of the Theosophical Society in New York way back in 1875. So regardless of where we are in the world, on this day, many of us turn our attention to the founding of the TS and also to our International Center in Adyar. With the aim of promoting the three objects of the TS, we have been an uplifting force for brotherhood in an often divided world. May we continue with this important work in an effort to promote unity and harmony in establishing a greater brotherhood of humanity. We in the Indo-Pacific region of the TS represent a vast variety of cultures and languages. Though we are united in our common goal to spread theosophy and engage in a promotion of our wonderful three objects. So again, on behalf of all of us in the Indo-Pacific Federation, I send you our best wishes and hope that this Foundation Day in 2020 will be truly inspiring and transformative for all of you. My regards to you all. Thank you and goodbye for now.
Moving on with our program, in which we already have about 230 persons from all over the world. We are going to listen to the lecture, The Founders and the Foundation, by our international president, Mr. Tim Boyd. He has been serving as international president of the Theosophical Society since April 2014. As part of his work as theosophist, he has held important and significant offices like President of the Theosophical Society and the Theosophical Order of Service in USA. Through these offices, he has emphasized the practical aspect of theosophy, as well as the importance of self-transformation and unity. His involvement with the Theosophical Order of Service and the Chushul Orphanage in Tibet led to an audience with the Dalai Lama, which resulted in the TS in America sponsoring his visit to Chicago in July of 2011, a two-day event attended by 10,000 people. He is joining us from his home in Chicago. Thank you, and please, Mr. President.
Well, thank you, Catalina, for the introduction, and thanks to all of our various federations around the world and to our Vice President for their wonderful good wishes and acknowledgement of the importance of this day. We're here to call to mind something about the significance of this Theosophical Society, of its work in the world, and of its foundation. The day is named Foundation Day. I have to say that coming from the United States, for many, many years, I was unaware that Foundation Day was the title for this day. In the US, it has always been celebrated as Founders Day, which is a small difference, but one which is nonetheless significant. Founders are easy for us to talk about. The founders have a history. They lived here among us. Their actions, their writings are here. Those are things that we can look to and speak about. And it's normally our practice on this day to touch on our founders and to emphasize the lives that they lived and what was the outcome of their living. So that's something that we can do and will do. Foundation is a little bit different. It's a little bit more difficult, perhaps, because the foundation is hidden. It's not seen. People are seen. What supports them and their movement is something of a slightly different nature. I have a little bit more experience with foundations than I would like. In some of the work that we have done trying to restore the Adyar campus, we have had to deal with actual buildings. Buildings necessarily, if they're going to last into the future, will have appropriate support and appropriate foundation. I do know that during the course of our renovation, our restoration of the Blavatsky bungalow, we noticed that there were cracks in the flooring. And as it turned out, it was because, as beautiful a structure as the Blavatsky bungalow was, its foundation was not sufficient to support it for a long time. For a short time, it was beautiful. But over the long haul, it was something that we needed to do significant work to shore it up and to reestablish a deeper foundation. Foundations, such as those for the Theosophical Society, are of a different nature, but it supports the work that we have been focused on doing for now 145 years. In the case of the Theosophical work, again, things are a little bit different. Normally, it is founders who create foundations. Any building that is made, the builders are the ones who make the foundation. In the case of our Theosophical Society, clearly it was the foundation. It was that which lies beneath this organization, which supports it and sustains it, that actually brought the founders into being. So it's a little bit of a different thing that we're talking about. So who were our founders? If we go back to the documents from November 17th meeting that inaugurated this Theosophical Society, we find that, technically speaking, there were 16 people who signed as founders for that first meeting. Future meetings, they allowed other people to sign on, and so there were more founders as time went on. But at the original meeting, 16 people were signed as founders. It's important, of course, to note that although there were 16 names, really, in those early days when the Theosophical Society was struggling, looking to find its place in the world, it was really two who were deeply involved as the principal founders. The way that Henry Olcott expressed it was that we had 16 people who were formers of the Theosophical Society, but really there were two founders who had to do all of the heavy work in the trenches in the early days. So those founders, even though we tend to look to them as the focus of the beginnings of this movement, they were always very, very clear about what their role in this foundation was. They would always make it clear that, yes, they could be regarded as founders, but only as the outer founders of this organization. That without the inner founders, none of this would be possible. And that really the work that they did was just the work of making visible what the inner founders, the masters of the wisdom, had projected as the work that needed to be done. So there's a very interesting image, beautiful image, that in Tibetan Buddhism that we encounter. It's something called the guru tree. It's something you will frequently see on tankas or spiritual representation in art. The guru tree. And it speaks about the foundations of the wisdom teachings that are found in Tibetan Buddhism. And the way it tends to be depicted is as a tree, but instead of leaves on the tree, there are great masters, great saints, seers, teachers who have appeared throughout the ages, and that each one seems to grow out of those predecessors that came before. Many of these images, this tree with its roots deep in the earth, all of the leaves of the great teachers, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, fill up the entire space. So it's a beautiful image that says something about the nature of the actual founders. Everything that we look to as the Theosophical Society grows out of something that has come before. And really the impetus for this, the reason that the masters say they set this into motion, was because there was a need and a possibility, which they seemed to see. The need was obvious. In the words of the Mahachohan, what they looked upon and saw was a world that was going into two directions, both of them dead ends. The one was the direction of what was described as brutal materialism. And that was something that was heightening. The other was the direction of dead letter sort of superstition. The religious impulse, the misguided religious impulse, and the misguided material impulse were the things that were influencing humanity. And there was a need for something that could connect people with something deeper, that could be a humanizing aspect for the people of the world. So that was the possibility. That was what was available. And then, of course, it was a matter of identifying agents who could bring this into the world. During the letters from the Mahatmas, they speak about how for 100 years they were searching for a suitable individual, a suitable body that would be able to be the link between their world and ours. And it was HPB who turned out to be that significant link. So with her, when you hear about her story, from her very early youth, she was aware of some great being that would be near her. And she would always, in times of trouble, which somehow or another she had a way of attracting, she would feel this presence. And it would be someone who could often save her from danger. And she would see this person, but never in a physical form. And she started to regard this one as her guardian angel. Of course, it was her master, the Master Morya. So it was only when she was 20 years old, in 1851, where she first actually saw this man, saw her master in a physical body. It was during the time of what was called the Great Exhibition that was being held in London to celebrate. The celebration was for the extent and the advancement of colonial England. And Nepalese princes appeared during that. And it was then that she saw this person who she recognized in the crowd. And she went to approach him. And the way she told the story, it was something where as she approached, he made it clear to stand still, don't come closer. And later, she was in a park in London, thinking about all of this, trying to put the pieces together of what had happened, what she had seen. And it was then that she had this meeting that really set her on the course that became the Theosophical Society eventually, where she describes that her master spoke with her and told her about the things that would face her, that they were looking to her to start this new movement, but that it was not time yet, and that so many things would face her and she would have to go through before that time. And she accepted that idea. This was 24 years before the Theosophical founding actually took place, 24 years before this day that now we celebrate and have celebrated for the last 145 years. There was work that she had to do in that interim period. Colonel Olcott's story is equally fascinating. His meeting with the master, his source of his devotion to this movement is something that is equally fascinating. Colonel Olcott he became a colonel during the Civil War in America because he was assigned to investigate the corruption that was happening with contractors for the Army, for the Union forces, that there was so much corruption that it was crippling the war effort. And they chose him to see what he could do about it. His work as an investigator for the Army was such that he rooted out all different types of contractor corruption. He was threatened, his health, his wealth, his life was even threatened in trying to do this work. People tried to buy him off, but he pursued his ends and ultimately rooted out a great deal of this corruption. This investigative mind that he had actually was the source of his meeting with H.P. Blavatsky when he turned this sense of investigation toward the mediums, spiritualism, and the mediums who were bringing through this very active movement in that time. Olcott was a man who didn't take anything on face value. He had to investigate. He had to analyze before he could give his confidence. He would go so far during these meetings with mediums, he had scales underneath the floors to see if when these supposed materializations took place, if there was any physical weight that they had. He just was not going to accept it merely because it was something that appeared before him. So when he met HPB, it was a similar thing that happened for him. He recognized that there were really unimpeachable phenomena that he was witnessing in her presence. Anyone who was around her for any length of time realized that there were things that were happening that were not capable of being explained in normal ways. So he saw that part. And HPB would speak to him about the basis for these phenomena, not to get caught up in those, but that it's something that demonstrates this sort of deeper wisdom teaching that explains these sort of things. He saw all of that. He listened to HPB as she spoke about the source of her knowledge, which she didn't claim for her own. She would always point to her masters, her teachers, the ones who had supported her, the ones through which all of this wisdom teachings, from which they originated. And he would listen to that. And as he listened to her, he started to have some level of confidence, but Olcott being Olcott, he always harbored some measure of doubt. He describes the moment where that doubtful nature was transformed. He describes his first meeting with one of these masters, the one who was his master. And if I could, I'd just like to share his words about how that meeting took place, because I feel it's fascinating. And it says something about him. It also says something about the nature of the founding of this Theosophical Society. Olcott describes that on one evening, they had been working on the manuscript for HPB's future book, Isis Unveiled. The manuscript was finished. He said he had told HPB good night, and then he was going to retire to sit down and read, and as he was an avid cigar smoker, to smoke a cigar, to read, and to think about the day's occurrences. So he says that very soon he was absorbed in his book, and he remembered the name of the book. It was Stephen's Travels in Yucatan. So what he describes, he says, as I was quietly reading, with all of my attention centered on the book, nothing in the evening's incidents had prepared me for seeing an adept in his astral body. I had not wished for it. I had not tried to conjure it up in my fancy, nor did I expect it. He said that all at once, as he read, with his shoulder a little turned from the door, there came a gleam of something white in the right-hand corner of my right eye. I turned my head, dropped my book in astonishment, and saw towering above me, in his great stature, an Oriental clad in white garments and wearing a headcloth or turban of amber-striped fabric, hand embroidered in yellow floss silk. Long raven hair hung from under his turban to the shoulders, his black beard, parted vertically on the chin in the Rajput fashion, was twisted up at the ends and carried over the ears. Quite a remarkable figure that he's describing. His eyes were alive with soul fire, eyes which were at once benign and piercing in glance. He was so grand a man, so imbued with the majesty of moral strength, so luminously spiritual, so evidently above average humanity, that I felt abashed in his presence and bowed my head and bent my knee as one does before a god or a godlike personage. A hand was lightly laid on my head. A sweet, though strong voice bade me be seated. And when I raised my eyes, the presence was seated in the other chair beyond the table. He told me he had come at the crisis when I needed him, and that my actions had brought me to this point. And it lay with me alone whether he and I should meet often in this life as co-workers for the good of humanity. That a great work was to be done for humanity, and I had the right to share in it if I wished. That a mysterious tie, not now to be explained to me, had drawn my colleague HPB and myself together, a tie which could not be broken, however strained it might be at times. He told me things about HPB that I may not repeat, as well as things about myself that do not concern third parties. At last he rose, and I, wondering at his great height and observing the sort of splendor in his countenance, suddenly the thought came into my mind, and this is pure Henry Olcott. The thought came into my mind, what if this is just a hallucination? What if HPB has cast a hypnotic glamour over me, something that she was capable of doing? I wish I had some tangible object to prove to me that he has really been here, something I might handle after he's gone. So he says that then the master smiled kindly, as if reading my thought, untwisted the turban from his head, saluted him in farewell, and was gone. The chair was empty. I was alone with my emotions. Not quite alone, though, for on the table lay the embroidered headcloth, a tangible and enduring proof that I had not been overlooked or psychically befooled, but he had been face to face, but I had been face to face with one of the elder brothers of humanity. It's a long quote, but I think it's something that at this point is when Olcott became fully committed to this work. He was working for it quite hard in New York, but very shortly after that is when the two founders left to go to India. And the movement really, really started and picked up steam when it reached India. There's an expression in At the Feet of the Master. One of the things that's said by Krishnamurti in that early work of his, in talking about the Master, he says, if you have seen the Master, you will trust him utterly through many lives. The example of Olcott and of Blavatsky speak to that. Krishnamurti also says, unless there is perfect trust, there cannot be the perfect flow of love and power. So based on their meeting and actually seeing the masters, the reality of this work and the importance of this work became something that to them was the focus of their lives. So for many people, we recognize who the founders were. But the foundation, what is it that underlies this Theosophical Society? What is it that we think of when we say it was founded? What is it that we stand upon? And I think very clearly, HPB and others, HPB's language was that the Theosophical Society, the reason that it was formed, was to assist in showing men that such a thing as theosophy exists, and to help them to ascend toward it. The Theosophical Society, she says, has no wisdom of its own to support or teach. It is simply the storehouse of all the truths uttered by the great seers, initiates, prophets of historic times. So the foundation, the founders are evident, but the foundation that stands underneath this is spoken of as theosophy itself. The many names that HPB, Olcott, and others have used to try to speak about theosophy. Sometimes it's called the divine wisdom, the sacred wisdom. It has been said that theosophy is a synonym for truth, the wisdom like that of the gods. All of these things are names for this foundation that the Theosophical Society was built upon. In many ways, when we think about wisdom and the wisdom that we speak of as the ageless wisdom, it's something that pervades everything that the Theosophical Society tries to do. It is everywhere present, but very, very difficult, never has been defined in a capsulized definition of what, in fact, this theosophy is. It is the ageless wisdom that supports all living, all being. That's the foundation. So on this day, where we think in terms of Foundation Day, it's a good opportunity to look toward those people who brought this movement into being, the ones we can identify. Also, I think it's very good for us to try and look beyond them, to look in the directions that these founders tried to point us. Because really, the Theosophical Society has a role. Theosophists have a role, but it's all in pointing us toward this self-transformative wisdom that is spoken of as theosophy. In many ways, we talk about, when we think about light, it's an image that is often used to express the nature of wisdom, of truth. Light is something that we're familiar with because we experience it in every aspect, every day of our lives. But when we think about it, light, actually in its true nature, light is unseen. It's invisible. If someone were to be out in outer space, light surrounds you, but it's only when you hold up your hand, when you give the light something to be reflected off of, that its presence becomes known. The Theosophical Society is that reflection, that body that came into existence to reflect an ageless truth that can, in fact, lead us toward self-transformation, that can humanize what we describe as the human being, moving us away from so many of the courses of brutality, of separateness that we have embraced over the history of our being in this world. There is a deeper possibility that this Theosophical Society was founded to present. For us, we have the demanding job of realizing something of this ageless wisdom so that it can be expressed as a balm in this world that we find ourselves. In every age, this sort of calming, soothing, deepening influence has been needed. In every age, it has been the few who have responded to it. Now, as in every other age, we believe that this is a time when, perhaps unlike any other, there is a need. The same patterns which the Mahatohan saw as active 150 years ago of brutalizing materialism and dividing superstition are as active now as they ever were, in some ways more so. So on this day, when we acknowledge some of the history and some of the importance of this movement, an additional thing that we need to add to this day is a recommitment. To the extent that we have found value in this, to the extent that it has helped us to see perhaps a little bit more clearly, let us recommit to deepen our contact and our expression so that this world may be freed to some degree of the sufferings that we continually find ways to inflict upon ourselves and one another. So I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time. Obviously, you wouldn't be here if you didn't feel it was something of value and importance. So I thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your words. And to continue with this celebration, we have Ms. Jaishree Kannan from Surendra Narayana Archives at Adyar. And she will delight us with the chanting of Nirvana Shatakam, a Sanskrit devotional composition consisting of 6 verses or slokas. This mantra was written by sage Adi Shankara, and it summarizes the basic teachings of Advaita Vedanta, or non-dualism. It is a keynote for Vedic inquiry. With its aid, the aspirant transcends all worldly experiences and attains union with the Absolute by denying the body, name, form, intellect, senses, and all limiting adjuncts. So now, with us, Sister Jaishree.
मनोबुद्ध्यहङ्कार चित्तानि नाहं न च श्रोतजिह्वे न च घ्राणनेत्रे न च व्योमभूमे न तेजो न वायु चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं न च प्राणसंयो न वै पञ्चवायुः न वा सप्तधातु न वा पञ्चकोश न वाक्पाणिपादौ न चोपस्थपायुः चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं न मे द्वेषरागो न मे लोभमोह मदो नैव मे नैव मात्सर्यभाव न धर्मो न चार्थो न कामो न मोक्ष चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं न पुण्यं न पापं न सौख्यं न दुःखं न मन्त्रो न तीर्थ न वेदा न यज्ञ अहं भोजनं नैव भोज्यं न भोक्ता चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं न मृत्युर्न शङ्का न मे जातिभेद पिता नैव मे नैव माता न जन्म न बन्धुर्न मित्रं गुरुर्नैव शिष्य चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम् अहं निर्विकल्पो निराकाररूपो विभुक्त्वाच सर्वत्र सर्वेन्द्रियाणां न च सङ्गतं नैव मुक्तिर्न मेय चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम्
Thank you very much, Jaishree, for this inspiring and meditative chant. And with this inspiration that comes from that sacred song, we come to the end of the celebration of the Foundation Day from Adyar and in connection with so many different places and people around the globe.